You're listening to World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world. And here are your hosts, Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
You are very, very welcome. My name is Ahonu, and with me again today, thankfully, is my lovely Aingeal Rose. She's been missing for the last couple of weeks, and we have sorely missed her indeed, because her input is absolutely wonderful to all of these discussions. And here we are today. We're continuing on from our discussions where we started talking about prosperity, and then we moved on to speaking about, what was the second subject?
Guilt.
Guilt, indeed.
Well, it's
guilt.
all under the heading of prosperity. These are just aspects of prosperity.
That's right. And then at the end of the guilt session, we promised that we would continue on to speak about fear, because these are the kinds of things that prevent prosperity from happening. And indeed, one of the things that we want to explore a little bit more today is how that guilt, and especially that fear, prevents us from recognizing and realizing and manifesting that prosperity that we are all so entitled to. And I say that in inverted commas, really, because I believe that every being is entitled to that feeling of universal abundance. But how do we tap into it? It's that old brain, that old mind keeps telling us from our past and all of that. As we found out in the guilt section, that we didn't deserve it, we weren't good enough, we had original sin, all those kind of stuff that we carry forward with us. So today we're going to look specifically at that fear, and Aingeal Rose is going to refer to her book, A Time of Change, where we're going to look specifically what Source had to say about that subject from the Akashic Records.
Right, and this whole entire series, it's a series we've been doing, this is number 3, isn't it, Hannah?
It is, yeah.
Is coming from the chapter in my book on prosperity, which are the Akashic Record channelings, if you will, from Source. So Source had first talked to us about prosperity being linked to communication with all life, and it went on to discuss how lack is not even a real word, because if we look around, that's all we see is abundance everywhere, okay, in nature and the things that life strives for, how life strives to continue no matter what the adversity, no matter what the climate change, it will always produce new life after some time. Absolutely. Okay, so it was talking to us about eliminating the belief in lack at all, and then eliminating the belief in guilt, okay, as two words that have no reality or validity in the truth of the universe. Okay, so that went on to a little discussion on fear. So now we're going to kind of pick up with the leftovers on guilt and go into a little bit about fear. Okay?
And just by way of referring back so that people have no misunderstanding about where we're coming from now when we speak about this, we did qualify those various layers and levels of prosperity and guilt in the past, where we spoke about, a person, a mother, for example, with children who has no money to feed her children, or a father who hasn't got a job, that kind of thing. We spoke about those levels. So we have clarified those in the past episodes. So that's not what we're going to be discussing here. We're going to move on now to this universal aspect of fear.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading further from the book, A Time of Change, which can be purchased at atimeofchange.info if you'd like your very own copy. Okay, so it continues with somebody asking, is there any way to get rid of guilt? So we're going to pick up a little bit from the guilt, okay? So Source says, to release guilt, you first have to stop believing in it, and then release the fear that is attached to it. Let's talk about fear, because Source is saying that along with the belief in guilt is the fear of eternal damnation. Only Source can prove to you that you are loved, forgiven, and innocent. Only Source can provide you with a sense of happiness that you desire. It can't be fixed from your own fear-based belief structure. You have to go higher to do it. You have to go to the place or level where there is no guilt, and that is to God Source itself, which lives within all of us. So this is the key point, Ahonu. It lives within all of us. All right, so the higher place that Source always talks about is into your own Holy Spirit inside your own body. It's not asking you to have some perception of some lofty being that's way out in the distance away from you or a different place. It's asking you to go within, that you have a Holy Spirit, a source of innocence, let's just say a wellspring of innocence inside your own body.
And indeed, isn't that the same teaching that we get from all of the sacred writings from all traditions all over the world, where they say, go within, go within. And indeed, even in the modern world, we talk about meditation, it's all about going within. So those ancient people, they obviously knew what this meant, and they knew how to do it, was to go inside and find that connection with God's source inside.
Right. Okay, so it says guiltlessness will be demonstrated to you when you're ready to believe in it. It isn't that you've never made a mistake in your life. It means that Source doesn't judge mistakes. In other words, all Source looks at is the love in its creations. And I think that's important because we're really talking about shifting belief systems entirely, and these are all within our minds. You see, we have a polarized thinking.
Yes.
We have that angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, or some people call it, the Holy Spirit on one hand and the ego on the other.
Right.
Let's say the negative ego. We're not talking about the ego self that allows you to function in this world. Okay? We're not talking about that. We're talking about the negative ego, the one that judges, criticizes, tells you you're bad, makes you believe there's something wrong with you, makes you think that there's something that you have to achieve in order to be worthy. We're talking about all of that. So guiltlessness is when you fully are not interested anymore in judging yourself or judging anybody else. You're not interested in blaming or making another person guilty. You're just interested in, that every aspect of life has a right to be here. It has a right to live, no matter what you think of it. All right, so it says there has to be a willingness to truly release fear. Not only is your own willingness needed, but are you really willing to give up judgment of yourself and everyone else? Think of all those opinions that you have every time you look at someone and perceive that they're guilty of this or that. Understanding and experiencing innocence with prosperity, we are equating innocence with prosperity here. So understanding and experiencing innocence means that all belief in guilt and judgment has to go. If you are willing, innocence will be proven to be true of you and also true of everyone else. When you get to this place of harmlessness, true abundance will be natural because you will be in the flow of divine love.
Wow. That, in a sense, is a beautiful absolution, isn't it, of all our worries.
It is.
And our listeners and our viewers will know from us in the past that theory is great and expressing all these grand, lofty spiritual sentiments is great, but we always do try to offer some kind of a solution, whether it's a solution on a material level or whatever it might be. We do like to offer some means of allowing this deep spiritual connection with God's source to come forward. And Aingeal Rose has expressed that so beautifully. Just read the last line again, Aingeal Rose, because that was beautiful.
When you get to this place of harmlessness, abundance will be natural because you will be in the flow of divine love.
Right. So getting to that place of harmlessness, there are many, many ways to do that, as we all know. And one of them is meditation, as meditation teaches to go inside. And once you go inside, then you arrive at that place of expansion, of all the field of all possibilities is what some people call it.
Now let me continue. Okay, Source says, I am the only one that can undo what man has made. I'm the only one that can prove it to you because I am truth.
I am.
I am
Just
truth.
Speak for a moment about the I am first.
Well, this is important because when Source says I am truth, okay, and let me remind people that Source is inside each one of us. It's a literal, tangible force of nature inside of us. So it's not somewhere out there. It's as close to you as your own skin, okay? But when it says I am truth, there's a lot of discussions in the New Age thing about how truth is relative and your truth might be different than my truth, and there's all these different truths. But I always say, yeah, that's true on the level of perception.
Yes.
But it isn't true on the level of source, where there's an absolute truth, and that truth is divine love, and that's all it is, okay? And I even remember, Ahonu, maybe you remember too, in doing these channelings, one time I asked who was speaking to me, and Source said, I am, and that was all that was needed, remember?
Sure, I remember that was an eye-opener, wasn't it?
Yes, but in that last paragraph we read it too, it talks about the willingness to release guilt and fear, and the truth is you have to do it across the board. You can't just say, oh, well, it's true of that person, but that one's guilty, or, well, now we're in the elections, right? So what do we see on TV? Hillary and Donald just seeing who can make each other the guiltiest.
That's right, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And you're getting the population coming on board where you got these camps. Oh yeah, I agree with Trump that she's guilty and blah 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 and should be punished. And then there's the Hillary camp. He's this or he's that. Unfortunately, we're seeing the extent of our own judgments. Okay, and
polarized on TV between two people, and it's happening all over the planet, in all humanity.
It's the same thing.
Yes,
it's
indeed.
The truth is, it's like
just a different measure of the same thing.
That's right. There is no. If you think you're right by blaming Donald or Hillary for something, then you don't even get what we're talking about today.
Yes.
Because Source is saying, and remember, this is a prosperity series. This is why you don't have the flow of serendipity in your life, or why you don't have the flow of abundance, or your good's not coming to you. Well, it can't come to you if you're in judgment. It just can't. And so, like Source says, you have to give up the idea that guilt is real. And when you're looking at a world whose whole system is based on guilt, it's a tall order. It's simple in concept, but in practice, we always want to talk about being practical in these series. The practicality is that it all begins at the mind level. What you perceive, what you believe is what gets attracted to us. And as a collective, unfortunately, we're falling short of the mark for sure. Okay, because we get engaged into this competition, this conflict, and it's really, like I say, it's all the same.
Yes.
Okay,
and that competition attracts us in a sense, because in some way, if there's less guilt on me and I can move more of it onto you, then I feel better temporarily, you see. And that's what everybody's trying to achieve. And whether that be by way of money or fame, fortune, luck, relationships, whatever way it is, if it makes me feel temporarily better, I'm going to go for it at the expense of somebody else. Now, I know we're kind of leaning on guilt right now. We are moving into fear. But in a way, that's what the fear is, that I'm going to lose my temporary feeling of security or betterness.
Well, here's also what happens psychologically, though. Okay? Let's see. If you make somebody guilty of anything, fear is the next result. In other words, fear is an effect of judging.
Yes.
Okay, so if you think about it, and I'll tell the story really quickly because it makes the point. Years ago, we were at odds with my mother-in-law at the time. Okay, different husband, everybody. Okay.
Different husband, everybody.
I keep trying to get it right. Okay. Anyway,
she's got it right this time.
Okay. I do. But like I said, she was not a nice lady, and she used to badmouth me and say terrible things. Well, finally, my husband at the time took a stand and told her she wasn't going to see the children anymore, because she would, when she had them, she would say bad things about me. Okay.
So there's that fear of punishment coming into play.
No, well, what happened was that there came a time when she kept asking to have them for the weekend. We kept saying no. Well, this one time, my husband had to be out of town on a business trip, and I had a seminar I wanted to go to, so there was nobody to watch the kids. So before I knew it, he had booked a plane trip to send the kids to Philly to stay with their grandmother. Well, I was livid when I got home when he told me that. I thought, how could you, blah, blah, blah. All right, so interestingly, I went to the ladies' room, and at the back, on my back of my toilet, I had these little sayings from A Course in Miracles. So I pulled one, and it said something like, "If you make somebody guilty, you will immediately experience a fear of loss." Well, that's what happened, you see, because when he booked the ticket, all of a sudden my mind went to, what if the plane crashes? What if they're not safe with her? I went to this fear of losing my children.
Yes.
And that card made me realize that fear was the effect of me judging her and not wanting her to have the joy of my kids.
Wow, what a beautiful story.
Okay, but I caught the psychological process. It was so fast.
Wow.
And so that's where we end up with fear. Fear is, the fear of eternal damnation. But if you judge somebody and make them guilty, you will automatically fear that you're going to be punished somewhere.
Yes.
It's just the way the psychology works.
Yeah. And is it interesting that psychology also works quite fast in that way too? When you were talking about judging another, that the fear is that if I don't dump the onus of responsibility and guilt on you first and quickly, then the fear is it'll come on me more quickly.
Right.
So it's like this game that we're playing, that I got to make you feel guilty first quickly, because otherwise
take it away from yourself.
The fear will come of it coming back on me is real.
Yeah. And that's what we do. We project.
Yeah.
We project our guilt onto other people, thinking we got rid of it.
So
but you don't get rid of it.
How does this relate to prosperity? Yeah. Because
when you judge, you limit. And when you limit joy. And, prosperity is being in the flow of joy. And that's our next topic, by the way, Ahonu, is joy.
Fantastic.
Okay, that's where Source leads us next on this, is fear and judgment limit the flow of life, because life is abundance and it's joyful. It's the yes word, Ahonu. I mean, Source says yes. That's the way the creative force works.
Right.
Whatever you think and believe, it says yes, okay, yes ma'am, and it doesn't discern if you're thinking something negatively or you're thinking something positively. It just makes more of it, whatever it is, okay?
Right.
So if you're going to judge and limit and take away love or joy from another person, then you're going to have less yourself.
So does that judgment of your circumstances apply across the board? And we spoke in the earlier section on guilt about, say, for example, in a practical 3D situation, in this reality where you'd have a mother and young children and doesn't know where the next meal is coming from. In her judgment of that situation, does it come down to that level of our understanding? She's not acknowledging the abundance of the universe now. It's not feeding her children in the moment, but she's making judgments about it. Why have I got no money to feed my children? Why me? What did I do wrong?
I think
is that what's happening?
Well, I think we can't simplify it like that, because she's probably not consciously aware that she might not even be asking those questions. Why? It could be that there is a belief system ingrained in her from her upbringing. So it really all does come back down to what your subconscious programming is.
Okay.
So a lot of people, and we discussed worthiness, and we could talk forever about people's beliefs about money and how to get it. Okay? And I think maybe we'll do a series on our thoughts about how to get money, because those have to be thrown away as well in order to get to see. We're talking about something
limiting the flow of abundance in lots of different ways. Right.
And the thing is whenever you decide in yourself how money has to come to you, you've already limited it. Okay, so somebody who has a lot of programs about money in terms of it has to come through hard work, or it has to come through this, or I can't go beyond my education, or whatever. Like I say, we'll talk about all of those. Those have to be looked at.
Yes.
But behind that, though, behind all those thoughts, really is the belief that you're not worthy of unlimited happiness and abundance. And that all goes to some very deep psychological core beliefs that we've been fed for centuries.
Is that what comes up when we dream of fear thoughts, or even when we wake up feeling a sense of fear?
I think it's the subconscious
just coming to the surface.
Bringing your thoughts or your worries to the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
And what does one do in those situations then? I mean, do affirmations work in those circumstances to try and get yourself back on level playing ground?
Well, I think dreams are always really good to examine. Okay, because they are the subconscious rearranging itself to give you a message.
Right.
All right. So it couldn't just be bringing to the surface that you've really been worried about this, and maybe you weren't aware of how much you were worried about it. Okay. So it's not about denying it right away. It's about saying, okay, I really feel this. I'm really worried about this. So you come out and you be honest about it, and then you say, okay, but this isn't God's truth. This is my little ego's truth. This is the belief systems of the world's truth. And a lot of times it centers around how you think something has to come to you. Okay, so there is a surrender involved in this process. And when Source says to us, are you willing to give up the belief entirely? Okay, in lack. Okay, it's a belief. In guilt. In punishment. In judgment. Are you willing to give up those ideas as having no reality at all? Okay, and you have to say, when you look at, well, here's my fears. You don't lie to yourself and say, oh, those aren't, it's just a dream. Because usually
they're real for that person and for you and I in those moments.
And there's usually an emotional component to them when you have them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it's worth examining. But you're honest with yourself. Whenever you expose anything to your consciousness, it can start to unravel. It's the stuff that stays suppressed underneath the surface that you have no control over, because you're not letting it out.
Right.
Okay. It's energy that can't move and unblock itself.
Was there another gem of wisdom in there about fear before we close today?
Let's see.
While Aingeal Rose is looking that up, let me remind you that one of the ways that we teach is Aingeal Rose's work on, it's a home study course on transformational writing. It's really how to actually get at those core beliefs that you have, that all of us have, that everybody has, and how to unravel them, how to write them out longhand now, not on computer, with a pen and paper. That's all you need to solve and resolve an awful lot of these issues and these problems. And it's an absolutely wonderful and simple method to actually find out where you are with your judgments and your misperceptions.
Did you tell them where they could get that?
Oh yeah, you can get that from tw.smartmember.com, tw.smartmember.com. You can also get it, of course, from worldofempowerment.com. You'll see the link to it on the right-hand side.
And it's called Write Your Way to a Happy and Fulfilling Life. I think that's the name.
That's it.
Okay, so no more about fear, because we've kind of said it all. Let's just leave our listeners with this, food for thought, and then next time we're going to go into joy. And how does joy and prosperity link?
Wow, I'm looking forward to that.
I happen to think they're probably the same thing, but
I look forward to that. So we look forward to seeing you back with us again for the next session on joy. It's been a joy actually sitting here and discussing this and presenting it to you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Aingeal Rose and Ahonu on World of Empowerment Radio, your station for practical spirituality in a changing world.